out today, but hopefully we can get into some sort of guidance for David to finalize a draft for next week. Is But I was told that Joan was going to be here
She
at
is.
8:30.
She's
Oh,
right.
she's here?
She's right there.
Okay.
I'm here.
Good morning, Joan.
Good
Thank you.
morning.
You are on my screen. Okay, so let's. You have a hard stop at 9:30. Is that correct?
I do.
Okay. So let's see if we can at least get through the new guidelines on the $10 million that came out of H315. My understanding, for financial reasons, administrative ease reasons, that you would like to not only use these guidelines for the $10 million that's been enacted, but for any other monies that may come through the budget bill for the same purpose. You don't see any reason to distinguish between the two pots of money. Right now, we have 20 million more in our side of the budget. That could potentially change, but is that a fair representation? All things being equal, you see very little distinction between this money, the $10 million, and the $20 million.
Yes, that is correct because of the way H315 was structured. We prioritized those who didn't receive anything, and then the second priority are those who did receive something. We take that into consideration, and we still calculate a grant. So it's not really administrative ease, it's also prudent use of funds. We are trying to finalize business requirements for the developers, and it would, if we have to do another program, it would take more time to develop, right? So we're going to wait probably about a month for them to be ready with this program. We are paying out people for the first 30 days who didn't get anything, then we're doing secondary priority. So I don't know when we'd be able to get to a subsequent program, but it would take more time, more funding, et cetera, and people would still be waiting. So that was the rationale. Like, why not take care of all of it and have the 20 million as a supplement?
So just to be clear for the committee, I think when you're talking about developers, you're talking about people who write programs to collect this data from an application and come up with
Correct.
something
Like
else.
what we do is we took H315, we translate the statute into business requirements. In other words, what are we going to require the applicants to submit? And then we have to tell the developers, what do we do with that information? What are the calculations? What would the review team be looking for? All of that gets into a business rules and business requirements documentation, which, the sooner we finalize it, the sooner the developers could start working on it. And then there's the development life cycle where they develop, then we test, then they go back, correct issues, we look at bugs, that whole process takes time. And then the process of soliciting applications, we'll have review teams going through each and every application. So all of it takes time. And so any change, I guess, I would want to do before we squared away the business requirements right now. You know what I mean? Because otherwise we're doing it after the fact, which means a subsequent program. I don't see how we could run concurrent programs. So.
Okay. So I guess that leads to my question of, we heard a lot of, I don't know if you heard any of the testimony from, was it yesterday? I can't even remember.
It's been all week. So it was Wednesday morning we heard from the lodging and the events.
I think they would like to see some changes or flexibility. And I don't know where that's going to go, but I could very easily see as we walk through, and thank you for the guidelines.
Yeah, that was helpful.
They're pretty thorough. I would, as we go through this, there could be some questions raised, not only, I mean, one choice we have in terms of the $20 million, what we're trying to deal with here is going to add a section to 159 on the $20 million recovery grants. The simplest version is say, use the guidelines that ACC developed for 315. That's the simplest. You'd be done. That's probably what you would like, preferably. But the alternative is we might come up with some tweaks to that, and the House, when we go to conference or however this plays out over the next 10 days, may have some tweaks that they want. So I guess what I'm asking is I don't want to go down a path that, or if we do go down a path for some changes, I want to go down that with our eyes open, that would be really problematic for you. Or if we got you these changes within 10 days and you can consolidate everything, that would still work for you. I don't know how far along you are on the $10 million that you couldn't like. I mean, some of the changes we may suggest may be changes you like, and so I don't know if I'm being clear, but if you could sort of respond to that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, it's sort of like a balance of two bad choices. I don't know how else to put it. Because if we hold up the business requirement sign off to wait to see 10 days what the changes will be, that's not good because it'll postpone everything from H315. If we go ahead with the H315 and then you've got changes, I guess people would just need to know there's going to be a time lag of when we can get to that. That's not going to be anything immediate because it's the same people working on H315 that would be working on any subsequent program. I just really don't know how we would do all of that at once. So it would just be a question of, if you want to do that, right, it probably brings us into the fall. Like, this is going to be nothing immediate. These things take a long time to administer. Just to give frame of reference, the estimate we have so far is like $250,000 to make these systems changes. So I get it.
If I look at the guidelines, you're
Sorry, may I just
looking
add?
you're looking at 45. Sorry.
Mr. Chair, the guidelines are not, I don't see them on our website for people. I mean, I know we got them as an email.
Okay,
but
let's get them posted.
I will forward them to Nathan. And Nathan, I don't know if you have them, but I'll forward this to you. And yeah.
I do not have them.
Okay, here they come.
Thank you, Senator Clarkson, for that. So as I read the time frame of the guidelines at this point, they were due on Tuesday, and they're posted, I think, also on the ACCD website. It looks like you're looking at 45 days before you start taking applications. That puts us in the middle of June. Is the way this is structured, if someone applies on day one, can that application be processed, or do you wait 30 days before you issue any grants and look at how much demand you have, or whether you have to? I guess you have to wait 30 days because the first priority group is within that 30 days, people who have no other assistance. So you can't really. I mean,
yeah, the way we're sorting it, I'll just help you out there. Yep. The way we're sorting it is that we will not review or pay on any other applications except the ones who do not have any prior assistance. So, okay. Yeah, people could apply, but it's going to go to the back of the queue. Right. But we will not wait 30 days for those who didn't get any help. Like, we will start processing immediately as soon as there's receipt. And again, we have no way of knowing how many and is there going to be a backlog, but I do know from experience that the review queue builds up quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, I mean, it is true that the second pot of money is coming down the line, probably 6 weeks or more in terms of it being actually enacted than the first pot of money. So, I mean, I guess it's going to depend. as we go forward, if we want to make changes, how we structure those changes, how big they are, how long they would take to implement, and whether we have that tension of, getting the money out the door in July versus August or September. So the committee needs to keep that in mind. But having said that, let's sort of walk through the guidelines if we could. I know,
They're now, Mr. Chair, they're now posted. So
okay,
the public can see them on our website, and our committee, in case they haven't found Jess's email of the 28th of April, they're now on our website.
Should we share the screen so we're all looking at the same thing, or are we doing it individually?
whatever people prefer, I printed out a copy in front of me here.
I have it in front of me on my iPad.
So we're looking at communication from ACCD, not David's.
No, it's on our website. And there was a letter from Jess Vintner on the 28th of April that sent the guidelines to us. But they're on our website now under today's date, under documents, I believe.
Okay, so let's,
Under Joan's name,
It should be.
Okay. There's-
Guidelines. They're
Yep.
called GAP recovery grants,
okay,
economic recovery bridge grants.
Yeah,
Got it.
it's on the website.
okay, let's start with just briefly go through the paragraph on eligible businesses must meet the below criteria.
So these are really almost identical to what we had in the prior grants in terms of domicile, whether they are for-profit, nonprofit, really kind of any type of entity outside of a government owned or government run. They need to be open, or if they're closed, they have plans to reopen. They're in compliance with the Vermont Forward Reopening Plan, and could demonstrate that the business experienced a net loss in 2020 greater than any net loss reported in 2019.
so
As
can
that-
can we
So we're
pause
gonna-
there?
I think the best way to approach this is to ask questions as we go along, as
Sure.
opposed to waiting to the end. And so one thing that I was asked, I think, and also have picked up myself, I think the law requires that there also be compliance with labor.
Yeah, it's on the next page. We're not finished with the requirements.
Okay, so that's on there, okay.
Yeah.
It's in-
And then one of the things that I know we have some discussion on, I mean, a few things that jump to mind from what we heard is people want to expand the size of the grants. They all want more money, but assuming we have to stay within what appropriations told us to do, they want the individual grants to be, the caps to go higher, the 3 months to go to 6 months, the individual items that could be used as fixed expenses to change.
Well, sure.
But they also, those are pretty easy to understand, but they made a comment, I think, which is valid, is what, if anything, are we doing for people who have continue to suffer in 21? Is this just a look back program for 20? I know when it first came out, the governor proposed a budget adjustments. I think we're still in 20, but it went a long time getting through the process. And so is there anything in this grant that reflects the problems some people continue to face in 21? Let's say they continue to be totally shut down during 21.
Yes, I mean, remember the 2020 loss is a eligibility requirement.
Okay,
But the calculation of a ceiling, if you will be dependent upon the monthly P&Ls for the period from March 2020 through April 21. So we do take that into consideration. So in other words, in the calculation of the award, it's 3 months of fixed expenses or 150, or a ceiling, which is your complete net loss plus any, adding back anything that you got that was not taxable, like PPP forgiven loans as an example. So if people still are experiencing a loss, that'll impact the ceiling is the way to put it.
so that's a
Yeah, I mean, I guess our thinking was that we're hard pressed to find somebody who has a loss in 2021 who did not have a loss in 2020. Like 2020 was a horrible year. So obviously, as we go through these, we do find exceptions. But as you know, that is the H315 statute.
Great. So just to be clear, the cap is now 150,000 or 3 months of fixed costs. How do you, the 3 months of fixed costs, which 3 months do you take?
Should we go down the rest of it's in it's in this guideline, but we didn't get to it yet. So do
Okay.
you want to go through this and we can get to it, or I could jump there, whatever your preference is.
No, you're right. Let's go.
Guidelines.
Let's go.
Can-
through it.
Okay.
I still have a
It's in the-
question about this sentence.
Excuse
Sorry.
me?
I still have a question about the sentence we're on.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Is there a separate guiding document for businesses that opened after February of 2020?
No, because if they opened in 2020 and they experienced loss, they will have a net loss in 2020. That was really who we designed it for, was because they had been left out of everything else. So
Okay, when it said greater than any net loss in 2019, that seemed
right, if it's applicable. In other words, what we're trying to establish here is there are businesses that may always be losing money, and it would be hard to differentiate what was COVID impact or not. So that addresses that part.
Okay.
But in the application itself, we have a section where it's sort of if applicable.
Okay.
Right. So if they were in existence.
I mean, as Senator Brock said yesterday, the more it's spelled out, for people who just might look at, people sometimes are looking at things with a different lens and saying, you know what, I don't think I'm eligible because I don't have a loss in 2019. When I read it, I don't see that it's only if it's applicable.
Right. So let me explain. This is guidelines as required by statute, but we are working on an FAQ, which will be much more granular. We wanted to keep this as high level as possible because we had 10 days from the time this became law to get it out there. So we will get much more granular.
Out there. Okay.
Sorry.
There's no changes that can be made to this then.
It's out there. It's been published. We could further clarify, which we will do. We understand that these are complex, and last time we also did FAQs, so we will cover that.
Okay, I would write the words if applicable after 2019. It's not clear to me at all that you don't have to have a loss in 2019.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Soldier on, Commissioner.
Is in good standing with Department of Labor, is in good standing with Secretary of State, and I say if applicable there because sole props do not have to register with Secretary of State. Is in good standing with Vermont Department of Taxes, is not currently in Chapter 7. These are all pretty much identical to our first two rounds.
I think what you're saying on 6 is the answer to my question, but I don't think it tracks what was in the statute. There are probably several labor laws that don't touch upon the standing with the Department of Labor. So I think that's a fairly easy tweak that maybe you can go back and look at. So there could be, equitable, someone could pay the example that I was given, people are not abiding by our equal pay law. The Department of Labor would have no idea whether
Right.
someone's doing that, and they'd probably still be in good standing. So I mean, even though it's going to be very hard to check, I think in most of our grant programs and contracts that go out, there's these boilerplate provisions that say,
Yes, attestations.
yeah.
We'll have attestations that will, I mean, if the Department of Labor cannot check it, who can?
No, it's a fair question, but
Challenge.
I think when you say an attestation by the applicant, they may give some pause if they know they've in violation of some law and may choose not to apply for that concern. So this is not meant to be a hard hammer or an enforcement tool, but I think we require it. You can ask the agency administration that question. They require those things on every contract. What does it mean? Is it effective? That's a secondary question, but it's in the applications.
Yes. So again, this is a guideline. It's not precisely every single thing. Like the
Absolutely.
application is going to be much more intensive. We have attestations that get vetted by agency of administration.
Okay.
I mean, if you want, we could show you what we've done last time. I was not prepared for that for this discussion.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I think we're on the same page. It's good.
Okay. They have to provide their federal EIN or social. Sole proprietors provide social. Their NAICS code. It's mainly for reporting purposes. Their monthly P&Ls from the period from March through April 2021, which is to understand the total cumulative net income for the period of COVID. Information about any compensation or assistance they have applied to or received, so that we could ascertain whether or not they had prior assistance or did they get forgiven PPP loans, because that's going to impact the calculation. So that's kind of more informational. We need their state and federal tax returns. Again, if they don't have 2019, they're not going to be required to upload it. And then what we're going to do is ask for 1 month of invoices for the following fixed expenses as spelled out in the statute. We're probably going to ask for like a representative month. I know there's discussion and concern about seasonality. Heat is more expensive in the winter, but frankly, everyone just got through a long winter, so we're okay with that.
Did you hear the testimony that people wanted things like property taxes and other elements?
I didn't hear the testimony, but I'm aware that that is a concern. And yeah, it was not our intent that these would all be spelt out as the only expenses, but that's how it ended up in the statute. Again, like, I don't know if you want to change that, we could, I don't know, maybe you could amend H315. Yeah.
Are these things itemized in 315? I forget.
Yes, they are.
Okay.
We forgot to use the word including.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. Which would have encompassed more and led more discretion on your, enabled more discretion on your part.
Yes.
Well.
An
Well,
attest.
It is possible that we could change that. I mean, well, maybe you could go back after today's hearing on some of the items we might want to look for change on, and ask the developer, if we go forward with a program like this with the listing that's here and it's in 315, and then we want to add property taxes, is that a huge program, developer program change to accommodate? I don't know if it's going to cost us another $250,000 to do that.
Probably not. I mean, I think that change probably wouldn't be a big deal, but just so that, we are translating these guidelines, we're creating FAQs, we would have to include that. We'd probably have to reissue it and get that retranslated. So everything is set in motion by what is set in stone and then what will be changed. Again, we have two choices. We could hold off before we begin everything, or we could just go with it and then change stuff midstream. I
Okay. I
Right.
know we
That's,
recognize the tension. I think the other big request out there, and I don't know how I feel about it because there are winners and losers, but you may have heard this as well, is that they're arguing for a larger cap in terms of the $150,000, and they're arguing for it to be 6 months of fixed expenses. All of those probably means that fewer people are going to be eligible because the average grant's going to be higher because the cap's going up. But I guess it might be useful between now and the next time we speak if you make a list of these kinds of changes for us to get a feel as to what the delay might be and what the cost might be to change these things. Because they may be, none of us, I think, are software experts, but these may be the kind of things that don't cause the system to crash and burn. So anyhow, let's go on.
Before we leave, Mr. Chair, before we leave this section, may I just ask a question about the PPP and EIDL loans, the other federal loans
Yes. go ahead.
and grants? Joan, do you get a list from the feds about who in the state have gotten PPP and EIDL loans?
It's just the list that they make public. It's not some special consideration to us because we have a grant program. So whenever they issue this public list of who is a recipient, we would have that. It's not ideal. It's not the exact same names. It's not done by EIN. A lot of manual intervention, but yes, we're going to check as much as possible. The other difficulty here is that we may not know the results of Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So a lot of complexity. I think we're asking the questions about, did you apply or, did you receive or did you apply?
Right. But you do have something, even though it isn't easy, you do have something.
We'll check the best efforts basis. I mean, that's all I could say. As you know, people do not have to apply for PPP forgiveness until 10 months after the end of the period. So we're not going to know that all. It's not perfect. So just so everyone knows going in.
Okay.
Where are we? All right. So the fixed expenses.
This is closed at the time of application. This is
Actually, let me ask a question about the 20 million. So that would become effective July 1st, the 20 million, correct?
Well, it's still a work in progress. Obviously, they have to go to conference and.
But I mean, let's say it passed in May. The bill is effective July 1st or effective on passage?
Every section is different in the bill.
Yeah.
Right.
They could make this section effective upon passage, or they can make it effective.
Right. So, I mean, as part of the kind of administration issue is it's not just the expense and the software developers and the translations and the public notice. It's at what point do we cut off and switch to the new thing? And what if people applied before and after? And how do we do that? If there's a date certain that it becomes effective July 1st, it's not easy, but, we probably could do it. It's
slightly easier.
Yeah, it's just different. And yeah. All right.
We could keep talking about that.
Okay, that's fine. Where are we? Attestations that they're going to use it to resume operations and economic recovery. For those who are not operating, a written description of its good faith plan to reopen. The footnote here about assistance amounts to calculate the adjusted net income. In other words, if they have forgiven PPP loans, we're adding that back into the net income figure to see if there's still a loss. They still need to have a loss in order to qualify. They could be bumped out at that juncture.
I'll go back for a second to the list of expenses. Didn't we use fixed expenses on earlier tranches of money?
No, we didn't do anything based on expenses for actually the economic recovery grants. It was all based on, the first round was sort of a percentage of their
Okay.
revenue from
Okay.
2019, and then 2020 was the
So then,
amendment.
the House was they spent more time on this than we did, and they passed 315 with these as the expenses.
Yes.
Uh, were these suggested by the agency, or they, bounce these around, and did they?
Yeah, these were suggested as examples, not as a exclusive list,
But it came out in the bill as exclusive?
Yeah. I
Yes.
did. At least that's the way we're interpreting it now. And,
All right. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Priority criteria. Right. Within the first 30 days, we're only issuing grants to applicants who meet all of the below criteria. They not only could not have received, but they don't have a pending application because of the restaurant revitalization grant funding. That's what we're concerned with. We would basically put them to a lower priority. And we're hoping, since the restaurant program opens on Monday, that folks, by the time they apply to ours, would have those results, but we're not sure. We can't speak for SBA and how they're going to process and how long their queue is going to be. I know they have got some very good targeted turnarounds, but again, we can't control that. So this is a way of determining whether or not they received grants before. If not, they are eligible for the priority.
I'm a little confused in terms of priority versus overall eligibility. So can a restaurant who, if you recall, or I recall, in the House version of 315, this language got eliminated, but they tried to make the statement that you shouldn't qualify, or you should have a lesser priority if you've received money from any of these other sources, or you have a chance to receive it, but will give you money if you get a professional to say you're not eligible and there's no sense of applying. Do we have anything? What's your intent and how you'll administer this for?
Yeah, that was early days. That was way back when we wanted this to be a bridge in January, when we knew there was all this forthcoming programs, and we thought if people were eligible for the federal, we should make them ineligible for this. As time went on, we realized that's probably not the best thing to do, since people might have gotten help in January and it's already May, June. They could have run out of it already. So we got rid of that requirement. However, in this guideline, we are only going to grant in the first 30 days if they have not received and does not have any pending application for assistance. Again, the thought process here is, by the time we launch this,
don't worry about it.
they would have known.
Hi, cutie.
They would know the outcome.
Don't worry, guys.
Becca, you're not muted.
Okay. Good to go.
So that's what this part is. This is describing, you didn't receive anything and you don't have a pending application. You're first.
Okay, so if somebody doesn't have a pending application, but we would want them to have a pending application, they're clearly eligible, but for whatever reason they chose to go to you rather than to the feds or to the restaurant program, what do we do with those people?
Yeah, as per the writing of this, we're thinking that probably the window will be closed by then. We know that PPP is over May 31st. Restaurant revitalization is opening May 3rd. We think it'll be done, but we're not sure. And I don't know. I mean, if someone did not receive any assistance and didn't apply, no, we're not turning them away saying you should have applied. Too bad. Like, I think that kind of goes against the original impetus of this. Like, I agree, like they should. Our advice to everybody is apply for the federal assistance. It's way more generous
Right, that's what I was thinking,
You
yeah.
know, it's way more generous. The restaurant revitalization grants are perfect. They're great, right? I don't know why somebody would not apply, but they could be closed out. So that's the other thing to take into consideration. I mean, it looks like a boatload of money, but their maximums are very, very generous. So we do think it's going to be oversubscribed. But
Well, is
yeah,
there,
we're not turning people away if they could have, should have, would have. No, we're not.
and a follow-up to that is, why couldn't you take their application and tell them, you have them in front of you, you have their application, why couldn't you tell him at that point, well, hold on to your application, but for us to consider it, we need evidence that you've applied for the restaurant grant. And you're denied.
Yeah, we did not embed this. We didn't require a denial. You know, again, timing on this is just extremely,
Yeah.
it's a moving target. I mean, we did this in January. It is May. We're going to launch this in June. I mean, to
Right.
tell somebody in June who didn't get any help, they should have, like, I don't know. Do we
No.
want to help people or?
Well, I want to
I
help.
get it. Like, I get it. They should have. And there's everything telling people to go and do it. But yeah, we stopped short of penalizing them for not doing it.
So my feeling is, not only are we not penalizing people for not doing it, but if they come to you and you encourage them to go there, but they have a very much a live application because they've previously failed to go for the restaurant money, they could then go to the restaurant money and they can get the restaurant money and then they can get this money. So not only are the rest of our businesses being deprived of some money, but they're sort of getting two bites at the apple.
We will have warnings on all of the award letters that this cannot, you know, the duplication of benefit issue. So because nothing is 100% perfect in terms of evidence, we still have that as a warning. You know, I don't, to turn someone away, to tell them to go to something else when that something else could be closed out. A lot of this is going to have to be, we're going to have to be cognizant of when they run out of money. And then I don't know, you get into why didn't they apply? Like, no, we haven't done it. Like, you know, again, this was meant for people who didn't get anything before, whether they should have or not. We did not go into that level of critique
Right.
or, you know, have them wait because they should have.
Yeah. Remember, we were hoping to have this out in like March.
I know. And I thought that, you know, last time we had similar issues and problems because there were a lot of concurrent programs out there. And we toyed with the idea, well, shouldn't we bump them to ag or bump them to AHS? It was like, no, we just do it. We do the warning and then we do the cross-reference checking with other entities. And that's what we're going to have to do on these. I mean, we're going to check everybody. Like, we have to check every single application once we get the public notice of who received what. I mean, there's a lot of follow-up on these.
Okay. So you list here the programs that you've identified so far. I'm just wondering, it says including, so if other programs come to your attention that should be considered on this list,
Yeah.
you know, a couple that have come to my attention, well, you have healthcare provider grants, but like we just put $5 million, I think, into the Working Lands Enterprise Fund. So can those businesses that, you know, are making hardwood products or something get a big grant from the Working Lands Enterprise Fund and then come here as well for money? There are,
Yeah.
specifically, I'm thinking of going down the list of the ARPA money and the CARES money where they put out grants for specific kinds of businesses that, the other thing is the real estate market, residential real estate market. There's just literally hundreds of $1 millions going out to pay people's rent to landlords that, they're getting some protection and help for. Should a real estate landlord with, multiple units in Burlington or something be able to come here as well as getting all those rental dollars on behalf of their tenants?
So I would differentiate here between federal programs and state programs. I mean, I think what we've mostly tried to do is identify the larger pots, which have been the federal ones. I wouldn't go into a list of the state programs. They're much smaller, and
But the two programs that I just mentioned
yeah, no, I realize
are federally funded through ARPA
Right.
or CARES.
I got that, and I think federal programs as much as possible. But I wouldn't, to go to your working lands suggestion, I wouldn't include state programs.
It's
But
all federal money,
So we've made a statement
all being
that
funded through ARPA.
it's any state or federal financial assistance. This is including but not limited to, and we also have any other direct financial assistance provided by CRF or ARPA funding.
That's right. It is all federal funding, one way or the other. Right. And rental assistance did help some big landlords, but not, and some smaller ones, obviously.
I mean, I'm just trying to, as I think Joan is also expressing here, is to target money to people who need it the most and don't have other pots of money to go to. So, okay. So let's keep plowing on. We got about 15 minutes.
All right. After the 30-day initial grant application window, in other words, after we've taken care of those who didn't get prior assistance, we'll continue to give first priority for those who did not get any assistance. But we'll utilize the second tier priority criteria to those who did suffer a loss and could still demonstrate a net loss after adding back any non-taxable assistance in 20 and 21, including the forgiven paycheck protection loans, EIDLs, and any other non-taxable. And we make reference to non-taxable because all of the economic recovery grants were, and though, they all got 1099s, and that should be reflected in their tax return. So that is the thing that after we do that calculation, if there's still a loss, they proceed. If there is not, they would not be eligible. It's the only way that we could think about taking into consideration all of the grant assistance that's out there.
And they not only would the adjustments for these other dollars potentially affect eligibility, they'd also affect the grant size as well, right?
Correct, because in the next part, when we talk about the formula, and the formula is 3 times the sum of the fixed monthly expenses as evidenced by all that, that list of invoices. And then, there's going to be a check in the system to say, is that less than 150,000? And is that less than the applicant's remaining net loss after the addition of the non-taxable prior assistance? So it gets back to the, adjustment of the award so that we're not paying anybody something greater than their loss.
Could the way this is written here, it looks to me like that's theoretically possible. Could the 3 months exceed $150,000, or would that be capped at $150,000 as well?
Yeah, it's capped. In other words, we do the calculation. If it's over 150, they're getting 150. Or again, it's the lesser of 150 or the applicant's remaining net loss after the addition of non-taxable. So the first is the calculation of the 3 times the fixed, and then we do the check, like, is it greater than or less than?
Okay. And where did the 150,000 come from?
It was a cap that was put forth by House. I think, yeah, I mean, I think, again, we came into this, we only had $10 million, so we didn't think that was going to go that far. So,
Mr. Chair, I'd asked House Commerce, and they said it evolved during the course of their conversation. There was no one group proposing it. I mean, it just evolved in the course of their work.
I think we wanted to do 300 like the last year's, but I don't know. I can't remember how it got limited.
I think just by virtue of the size of the money amount we had to deal with, it
Right.
was a small amount. I mean,
Much smaller, yeah.
I mean, I would defer to Joan in this context, but I feel like a cap is really different than an average award amount. And I would favor increasing the cap because I just think if we're starting with talking about businesses who haven't gotten anything, that's a pretty, $150,000 might not go very far for certain types of businesses that are event related, summer focused that we're not thinking about. And I would rather give them a little more discretion to depart upward. I think we've heard that is really critical for certain industries.
Right. So I remember some testimony where they were are there any projections based upon past tranches as to, under this scenario, what number of percentage of applicants would bump up against the cap, or what the average grant might be? Do we have any idea at all at this point?
No, I mean, it's really going to depend on the size of the business and the size of their overhead. I mean, I no way of knowing. I mean, larger lodging properties, this probably is not going to help that much. Smaller businesses, it's probably okay. If the small business doesn't have fixed expenses, probably not going to help.
right.
I think the key here was again, back in December, whenever we designed it, it was like, there were people who didn't get help. We need to help them. There were new businesses that started. There are lodging properties that have fixed expenses, irrespective of whether or not they receive revenue. This was a way to prevent foreclosures, prevent actions that would cause that entity to no longer be in business. So that was really why it was so limited in scope, because we had a limited pot of funds.
I was just thinking if there was some way to make this more flexible. I think I agree with Senator Rahm, but I have some aversion to just having a flat number. Like,
Yeah, unfortunately, it got into the statute. I mean, we wanted it in guidelines because last time we had some flexibility, but y'all didn't want to do it. So
Right. Well,
where we are.
well, we can correct our actions, whether they're mistakes or not, I don't know. But I mean, we face the question that we started with,
Yeah,
various
same
questions.
question.
But certainly, I think changing the number, a flat number, I can't see that as being a huge programming issue. But it doesn't get at the fact, I don't how I feel about receipts, but at least in terms of a cap, if it was a floating number to say like a certain percentage of, receipts in 1 year or profits in 1 year. So I remember really even early on, I was concerned that the maximum of 300,000 for some businesses may be like really a drop in the bucket. But we'll talk about it some more.
Yeah, the only thing I could say is that if you want to increase the cap or give us flexibility and you do that in H159, I'm just not sure what action we take right now Like I'm actually flummoxed. Like, do I change it? Do I have the right to
Right.
change it right
No,
now?
if
Because
we-
right now,
Well, we would talk to you, and the best that we could do is to say, we'll make this effective upon passage, and it also modifies what we did in 315. So in 2 weeks, for instance, you could potentially have a new cap. But I don't know if that meets your needs. It does probably delay everything
It delays, I think, for
two,
Joan.
2 weeks, but that's not that long of a time. Or the better alternative or the safer alternative would be to go forward with this for the $10 million and see what the developer of the program could say. Well, by the time you start issuing checks, I can easily change that to 250, and we could make it, if feasible, applicable to the first 10 million or not. I mean, we need to work together if we want to do that, to see whether that helps people more than hurts in this process. The other concern that was raised, I think I raised it, was if we raise the cap, it's probably going to mean
It's fewer.
less businesses are going to qualify because you're going to run out of money that much sooner. And, how do
we just need to figure out, are we launching a program at the end of May, early June with the current
Right.
parameters? If we are, I could go forward and do this. If we're not,
We hear you. We hear you.
I'm just thinking of all the developers saying, what are you changing it or are you not? Like, how do we begin development?
Right.
And quite honestly, all the people who have still gotten nothing. I mean, who still haven't.
Correct.
So the people who still hadn't gotten anything in December are still the same people probably right now in April, almost May.
So I think a lot I think we're being transparent and open here, that we have the same concerns that you do. And I think we need for you to go to the developer, and some of these questions we've talked about where we might want to change the parameters. Is it feasible to do that very quickly and inexpensively? Or if we wanted to change it, we may just have to say that the second group of 20 million that comes in is subject to a different set of paradigms, and how much of a delay would that cause?
And do we go back and pay the first group of people?
No, not necessarily. No, if we do the second
right.
one, I think you'd be stuck with what this first one is, but you'd have a new program for the second pot of money. These are administrative issues I think if you could come back next week and tell us what you've learned and having some of these discussions.
Well, we've been discussing it with the developers, and they say,
Okay.
tell us when you know. And I don't know still. So
Okay,
yeah, I mean,
you're in a bind.
we're in a bind, or we're not in a bind. We just go forward as statute as dictated and we build it. And then if you want to do something different with the 20 million, we'll have to rebuild another system. One other data point, as of this moment, I don't think the budget has any admin on the 20 million. So I don't know whether that just gets fixed or what, but we would have no permission to spend any money.
did you have admin on the 10
Yeah,
million?
on the H315, we had up to 5% of admin costs.
Well, we can put that in.
You
I
can
think
put that
makes-
in 159. That's not.
we can
All
put
right, but
that in.
again, the marketplace should know that it's not going to be immediate. Like
Well, I don't know why they would have,
I
I don't know
yeah.
why they would have any reason to think that the 20 million or whatever that number turns out to be would be any faster than the time frame for the 10 million.
Well, it's just because the program would be established and we would just fund it with 20 million. This way, we're doing a whole new program again. We go back to the drawing board, change the applications.
It
And
would be a
I guess what I'm
continuum.
still at a loss, and I know you have to go, is
Oh, yeah.
when we're talking about things as simple as the changing the 150, using that as an example.
Yeah, it's simple. It's just that it all goes into a calculation that's programmed. That's all.
Okay, but I
Like
don't
they're
know.
gonna do a comparison. and-
I'm not a programmer, I'm just not knowing whether something that simple would cost $250,000 to change and take a month to develop. I just don't know. So.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. I'm gonna let you
Thanks.
know.
I'll leave you with Ken and Megan, and I think you're in good hands for the rest of the discussion, and
Thank you for being here.
thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Joan. More to follow.
Bye.
Yeah.
Okay. Committee, I was hoping to finish up on 159, the other loose ends we had, and then we'll go to Ken and we'll talk about the capital stuff. Why don't we take a 10-minute break now? And if that's okay, Ken, what is your schedule? We have David Bradbury for about 10 minutes before you. Can you stick around after that?
Yeah, at some point I have to do a little project that's, I'm told, is an emergency, but I don't know when that is. But so
Okay.
you're just gonna have to beg, I'll have to beg your forgiveness if I get
Okay,
called out for probably 20 minutes or so.
okay,
Okay?
sounds good. And David, can you be with us in 10 minutes? Is that okay?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.